Okay. So
I'll get
first,
a cushion. I'm just going to get a cushion.
okay.
Because it's really nice for my back on this particular
I
chair.
have my own here.
Yeah. Makes
Yeah.
a difference, doesn't it? Make sure
Yeah.
my hair's flat. I cut my own hair and it was sticking out a bit. Do you know?
The hair under this, coronavirus. Tell me.
Yeah, it's coronavirus hair.
Yeah, well, but well, so start please first with saying your name, where you are now. Yeah, some basic things about yourself.
Okay, so I'm Rosie Burrows and I'm in Belfast in the north of Ireland. And I've lived here for many, many years, as well as worked in other places. I've worked in South Africa and Sri Lanka and throughout Europe and a little bit in Scandinavia, but I'm based in Belfast.
Hmm? Hmm? And is it your flat now where you are, or is it also your office?
Yeah, I have a home office in the front room, which I was going to sit in because it's very nice. It's got all my books and things. But then recently, with the COVID-19, I've been so drawn to hearing the piano. I play the piano, so I'm channeling Laura Pearls. And sometimes I have a client in the front room, and if they go to the toilet upstairs, I play the piano occasionally and they just love it.
Uh,
So it's something that's a really important part of my life, the piano, and creativity.
mm-hmm.
And then out here, I don't know if I can show you on the camera, but there's a lot of trees and a garden, a lot of bird song and herbs and some potatoes grown. Being Irish, you have to get your potatoes in.
Yeah.
And a lot of other things, flowers and all out the front, and a Celtic sparrow, which is very important in Irish culture. We have these really old symbols
Okay.
that support us and connection to nature, which supports us to have a very deep rootedness when we're freer from kind of trauma and survival identifications. Well, we'd call them interchecks. But another kind of, I love translating Gestalt into more ordinary language that people can identify with as well. I think that's really important that we do that.
And you started saying something about the piano, and can you say something more about your passions, about your values also? Human being, more than at least more as not yet as a human Gestalt therapist, but as a human. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I love that piece. Yeah, the being is so important, isn't it? Not just our doing. So, yeah, well, my passions would include everyday practices that I call everyday Camino. And I have a practices of walking in nature because 10 minutes away there's a beautiful wood called Beaver with very, very old trees, some of the tallest trees in Ireland. And I go there and there's a river called the River Lagan. There's a beautiful song called Lagan Love about that river, which is worth checking out by Sinead O'Connor. Even though the Lagan she refers to is another part of Ireland, we can steal it. And in the north of Ireland as well. Yeah, she lets us do that. And so I would have that kind of regular practice of connection with nature. And that's become more and more important to me since working a lot with war trauma. And well, now I'm getting back into work. It's really interesting to separate out, and sometimes that's hard in a context where it was in the past anyway quite intense or very intense at times. So now, though, there is much more an embodied sense of relaxation, well-being, and kind of self-permission to be more focused on my own life and creativity, and integrating that part as well into my own practice, because I think people yearn for that. So I know I'm veering back into my practice, but it kind of weaves in. You know, in trauma work, they have this figure of 8. And also in the Celtic spiral, there's a figure of 8, which would be, and it's like the trauma vortex. So all the most difficult things in life on one end of the 8, and then on the other hand, part, all the most beautiful things in life and our relaxation and healing and all the rest of it. So it's very interesting how modern neuroscience also can relate to very old ancient wisdoms that are in the culture that people knew in some way about these patterns. So that interests me a lot on a personal level, and then also on a professional level, and writing poetry. And I have a poem that I've written, and I can read it later.
Yeah.
And it is related to work, but it's also one way that I've handled living in an environment with very high levels in the past anyway of trauma. Well, they're still in people's bodies, so it's still high actually. But it's one way I've handled that impact, and also taking photographs. I have a kind of practice of taking a lot of photographs, especially in nature, like close-ups.
Okay.
You know, where you go really close with the camera into details. And actually that's a whole practice that I'm developing, and I find that it just brings me into a state of wonder. You know, like that kind of state where you're really open, and it's like, wow, this is just incredible, you know, and delight. It's almost like the childlike natural state, if you've never been hurt, that you're just wide open to the experience, and there's like joy and delight and a lot of energy and aliveness. And so I find that when walking and pausing and taking close-up photographs of parts of trees or flowers, and actually I'm going down a route now with artistic route with that, as well as, so in a personal way that's evolving. And the other good news during this COVID-19 crisis, I have to tell you, I'm so proud of this. I think I'm flushing with it's kind of giving me a warmth. Is that I'm in a group called Women Aloud, and we're like, it's a women's writing kind of collective. And there was an invite to write a piece during the COVID-19 on the particular geographic area that you live in. So I wrote a piece to my grandson called Dear Owen. And it's about my wishes for him for the future, and missing him because of the separation due to COVID, because he's up way up in the coast in Ballycastle, you know, by the sea, 60 miles away. Oh,
this is not mine. I've got mine somewhere there, but this is okay. Not distracted, just wanted to nature.
So nice, because I was talking a bit too much, because I'm a bit kind of excited to connect with you being in Poland and me in Ireland. But I want to say this piece, this book, the piece I wrote has gone into a book with 30 other women writers, and it's gone to #1 in the Amazon short stories chart. So that's like really gratifying.
Wow.
It's called North Star. If anyone is interested, it's called North Star by Women Aloud NI, and it's like just beautiful stories and poems written during this last 8 weeks.
So your son, because I was distracted, sorry for that. So he, obviously lives with his mom, and they live where? In the US? Did I recall myself right? he lives with your daughter, your grandson.
My grandson is Rowan. He's called after the tree,
Okay.
the rowan tree, which is good luck in Ireland to have a rowan tree in your garden.
Mm-hmm.
But he's 60 miles away, just on the north coast of Ireland, facing Rathlin Island, which is a beautiful island between Scotland and the north coast. Yeah, he's up there with my daughter and her partner.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't. Yeah, because I know you a bit, but I thought so. You've got two daughters or one daughter then?
I've got two daughters.
Yes.
I've got a 30-year-old daughter who's just had a baby, who's 9 months. So that's my first grandchild. That's wonderful.
Yes.
It's like so wonderful. I didn't ever imagine it would be this good. You know, I mean, you do have a bit of extra, that sense of responsibility towards the future, even more so. I already have a lot of that, but even more with him. But it's also a real joy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the piece I've written, in a way, it includes the whole issue of climate change and climate justice, as well as a lot of music and dance. And what him and I will do is when we get together, which we will do next week, and also in the future, hopefully when he's a young person, I'll take him to some of the music places in Ireland that were really significant places where young people came together who did not want to identify with the big political blocs of unionism or nationalism. They wanted another space. It's not that they necessarily didn't identify with some aspects, but we wanted another more creative space that was freer from those influences. That was a more creative space, really, so that you're choosing your own identity and values rather than having these imposed sectarian categories. You know, are you Protestant? Are you Catholic? Are you nationalist? Are you unionist? Very narrow and binary. And my whole life at work has really, in a sense, been trying to kind of duck that, and I haven't always succeeded. I've sometimes got the bullet, metaphorically, not literally, thank goodness. Although I have survived many things, but yeah.
Thinking about this activism, I just wonder if if you could say more or develop more these values that makes you a person, or that you make you a person.
Well, I think that is rooted in my childhood and growing up in a very strict kind of Protestant Baptist family, so very religious. So a lot of imposed rules and stern, you know, as well as my parents were very loving and generous and kind, but there was this harshness in the culture and an authoritarianism that actually I discover is on, it can be in any culture really, that authoritarian kind of need to be right. So, you know, that was difficult for me as a child, and I needed to escape a lot outside to play with other children because I was an only child, so it made it more intense. And my parents were quite older, you know, when they had me, and my granny lived with us, so that was quite strange for a child, you know, because granny didn't speak much, she'd had a stroke. So I would love to go out into nature and riding horses and in a way the freedom. So that kind of sense of connection to the earth and sensuality, like horses are just, you know, the smell of horses, that kind of sweet, warm smell, the sensuality of it, that's been so important. And really in a way that, and then discovering music. I played the piano from quite young, but it was all like classical or religious music. And then, you know, I wasn't allowed to play other than that. And it put me off then. As a teenager, I just rebelled. and then got into, you know, all kinds of other music and dance. And that was another path that then brought me into more libertarian ideas and social justice and all kinds of other movements. Yeah. So in a way, my values are deeply rooted in, that kind of freedom of expression, because I know the damage it does when people are not free to express themselves creatively and politically, culturally, you know, when you're meant to think a certain way. And even among, you know, colleagues, I've struggled with that. There would be a kind of split, I guess, between the whole area of, do you agree with physical force or not, you know, violence or not. And actually, I don't even want to judge people, because I can understand the history of Ireland and how that arose and how people would get involved in a violent struggle. And at the same time, I can see how that creates a lot of damage in a society. No matter how worthy the goal, it's really that I've deeply, deeply learned that the process matters so much, and that we stay relational. Otherwise, the trauma just comes so into the systems and people polarize. And, you know, sadly, that has happened in Belfast in the Gestalt community, though I'm still holding hope in my heart. And some of the principles around the Good Friday Agreement, that we can work that through. Yeah, I would really hope for that. And I'm not surprised that in a way there was some splitting because of the degree of trauma that went into the ground, you know, or into our bodies. And and I've really then focused on that. How do we support ourselves and each other to come out of polarizations and accept all the different parts of ourselves in a way that brings us back home to a sense of wholeness and love, really, and compassion. And I feel strongly, I have to say this, I feel strongly that in the Gestalt fidelity scale, we don't have the word compassion in it. And that's been something that I've been advocating for, to add compassion and self-compassion, because if those ingredients had been there all along, I think some of the kind of painful parts of conflict could have been prevented in terms of, you know, the Gestalt community in the north of Ireland, and maybe everywhere, because there's a lot of splitting goes on. And I think this, like, really anchoring in compassion and self-compassion first. You almost need that to have fully compassion for others. Yeah.
This is interesting. Yeah, you are completely right that this kind of trauma is in our bodies, and so the split, the polarization seems to be colonizing all the spheres, like in Poland, for instance, all the themes of the public discourse, anywhere. The split is everywhere, and it is obviously in history of our country here in Poland, but you are right that it is in our bodies, and in our bodies there is lack of this wholeness. This is important factor to be underlined. Sometimes we keep forgetting that it is only our some kind of opinions, attitudes, and from generation to generation inherited by but it is embodied.
It gets embodied. And with another colleague, Breege, we really did a lot of work on that transgenerational trauma. And we did support the naming and acknowledgement of that transgenerational trauma. We were part of a movement to get that named, which was really significant. to do so, but we're still really working with that, and I see that everywhere. You know, the need to work with the trauma on a collective level, and as well as individually. So I would have that in my practice, the individual work for really digging down and learning deeply what's most effective, and I've just continued to study that, you know, for the last 30 years, going deeper into it and learning more. And then in about, not this Saturday, but next, I'm going to be offering a workshop on collective trauma. Just a 2-hour introduction that will be experiential with an organisation that is very ecologically oriented called Common Ground. NI. So that's lovely to be doing that work, and it's really coming from my heart because I can see how it's needed, and I've put the time in at 4 to 6 p.m. because I'm hoping people in other parts of Europe and also America can then attend, whereas rather than a morning workshop. So everybody's welcome.
Will you advertise it on the listserv?
Yes, I'll put it on, and it's, you know, it's hopefully it's at a low cost, you know, and it's also, if people cannot afford, genuinely, they're welcome to come anyway, so that nobody feels they cannot come. I think that's also very important at this time, to, you know, to build that inclusivity. And to really work on these issues around, you know, are we creating well-being for everybody, you know, in an inclusive way, and dealing with the traumas and the, you know, the issues that probably a lot of people don't want to look at because they're so frightening, like climate change. And I do feel that needs to be part of our work in Gestalt. So I do call the way I do Gestalt eco-Gestalt. And because I wanted to be as holistic and include all the different parts of ourselves, you know, physical, emotional, social, ecological, all the different, sexual, spiritual. Don't leave anything out. Because we need all of us.
And during this workshop on collective trauma, will you be also touching upon those issue of compassion and self-compassion? I wonder. I would like to hear more. I mean, I don't know if we have time here. I suppose this is a very, I mean, of course we more or less know what compassion is, but I would like to, you know, to hear more, to experience more with that. Even just say, given the very fact that you, I remember you saying this, that this scale, what's the name of the scale? A fidelity scale. I would be interested to know more. But so if you could just shortly, and then I hope I will somehow be hearing more from you, but just also here, if you could say.
Well, it's very interesting. It's like a lot of us will know in Gestalt about grounding and feeling our feet on the ground, for example, you know, or feeling our sitting bones, so that we're not only up here at this level, but there's many practices to support us to be more in our hearts and feel our connection. And then when we really get a felt sense of that, I really believe that's where change really occurs deeply, you know, at the heart level. And when we integrate that kind of experience of being more in our hearts, which is close to compassion and self-compassion and love and all the good stuff, intimacy. And then I almost want to touch my heart, you know, to keep open in that area. and see that as a practice for supporting us not to feel alone in what's going on in the world at the minute. That even at moments, if we're triggered a bit in some losses or grief or trauma or some memory that's uncomfortable, we can kind of come back and settle more in the heart area. So yes, there will be experiential work on that area, and creating a community that's, well, in Ireland, north and south, because we've obviously that split as well. So creating more unity that way, as well as across with Scotland and Wales and England, and then throughout internationally. I think it's important we connect at this time. So I really appreciate your initiative with this conversation. That's really beautiful. Yeah.
I only know this Heart Sutra from Buddhism. I remember when I did some retreats in the past, and then I somehow withdrew. But anyway, so I remember how important for this common meditation, like 2 weeks long retreats, those singing also, and was important. Yeah.
Lovely.
So this is I can relate to, but I'm interested how you as a therapist would present that also. And okay, and now the question that I ask everyone is, how did you come to Gestalt world? How was it?
Okay. I came to Gestalt in 1990. I'd heard a little bit that there was Gestalt up in Derry in the northwest, and there was some not so good reports, like it would get called Gestalt and Battery, because it was so confrontative at that time. There was some unskillful practice. So then I was invited into a group in Belfast, which was the first Gestalt training in Belfast, and it was mainly organised by women involved in community development, adult education, building structures really that we needed to support the peace process and support, say, women's development and people in working class areas and everybody really as well. But this, I guess, specifically focused on groups that were more marginalised and didn't have a voice, and building those structures. Nearly all of us were involved in that way rather than individual work, even though we all trained in Gestalt therapy. All of us I think almost all of us in that first group anyway, we were all doing community-based work and work in the social structures, and I was starting to get a lot of freelance research work, which was very exciting at that time because there was a lot of European money from peace and reconciliation funds.
Okay.
So there was so much work for people like us, basically, at that time. And it was a very exciting, dynamic time with a lot of hope, even though the war or the conflict was still active, and it was very frightening. And we were a mixed group, and I think that there was a lot the trainers did not know about trauma, and there was no risk assessment. So the things that we've now learned, or I've learned anyway, that need to be in place when going into a context where there's been high conflict. But anyway, that I was also doing a PhD, which was very exciting, on holistic approaches to health and well-being, and looking at intentional communities and different kinds of leadership and approaches to health and well-being, because I knew myself I needed that. So Gestalt was part of that, and I was also experimenting with things like reflexology, aromatherapy, Tai Chi, all the embodied things, because I needed it, and it was so wonderful to be able to study that as well and experience. So it was exciting, and we got to Italy as well, and we went twice to Italy, with the New York gestaltist called Isha Bloomberg.
Yeah.
And it was all very exciting for us, you know, to be together as a group. And we were so innocent, I think, in a lot of ways, despite some of our experiences. We were so open, you know. I mean, it's incredible. That touches my heart, really, thinking back to that, and how we would talk about really highly risky things, or how one time the British Army came to the door when we were all on the floor like being animals and making a lot of noise. The British Army knocked on the door that we were doing the group work in because we were being so noisy. So yeah, there was a lot of great learning.
And what attracted you the most at that moment about Gestalt practice theory?
I think when on the first weekend, when it was very experiential and so much about connection and contact and learning about projection, which of course all the projections were flying. We didn't know about it. They were flying all over the place. And this one trainer, Hilda Courtney, said, in Gestalt, life is an adventure. And I said, oh, that's what I want. You know, it was so different from, say, cultures of restriction. It was more about expansion and life being an adventure and a learning adventure of contact and novelty.
You mentioned this freedom you mentioned at the beginning as a child.
Yes. Yeah, the sense of exploration. So now I know in trauma terms in the brain that basically that was taking us out of the threat part of the brain, or out of the amygdala and fear, which had been very got into our systems, and taking us into adventure, exploration, curiosity, and integrating left and right brain and doing all kinds of things that we now know from neuroscience that weren't being named then, as I guess they weren't really known. We didn't have that kind of data. And you know, the book Trauma and Recovery, I think it came out in 1992, but it wasn't into the Gestalt community yet. But some great practices, embodied practices and movement, working with dreams. And that was very exciting. And we became very close as a group as a result of that, which was beautiful at that time when there was so much fragmentation and division externally.
Well, so it is amazing because 90s you started then in the 90s, and it has well, the world has changed so much. I mean, like this discoveries of neuroscience, as you mentioned, this contribution of neuroscience, which was like to put into scientific terms what others already somehow. I mean, like Gestalt, but also you said those wisdom were already somehow there. But anyway, it is. I mean, it is fascinating to imagine you starting there, and then you know, with this background, with this conflict in your country, and then learning as if. In practice all that. I mean, I don't know how to somehow articulate it, but yeah.
Well, what we were doing is, I call it the Versatile Practitioner now. It's a term I kind of used for the Gestalt Research Conference in Paris in 2017. And I thought what a lot of us were doing, and I could recognize doing, is working at different levels of system, like in the Edna, Vistol, Melnick, Sean Gaffney, all of those organizational people would call levels of system. We were doing that right from the start and building community structure as well as them working individually. And a beautiful thing has happened. You know, it's like my very first client that I had, and she had had kind of sexual assault and a lot of really difficult issues and was very young then. she then came back to me just a couple of years ago. And, you know, that's a gorgeous thing about being a practitioner in a field where you're there over time and you're working at different levels of system. And that kind of, so now we're working with different issues at this stage of her life. But that touched me a lot, that I suppose it's again issues around connection and depth of connection and that growing. So we do have a lot of community infrastructure here that developed during the conflict, and Gestalt has played a very big part in that and in bringing forward innovations through practice research in a number of areas, and it's really rangy. I would love to see us celebrate that, you know, to come together and really celebrate what we did, because a lot of us, we'd also overworked because we had some trauma in our own systems and we were on the kind of hyper arousal piece. So now when there's been much more stabilization and integration of the experience, I would love that.
So, I guess now I'm thinking of this conference in Ireland, which is postponed, but I am really interested now to see Ireland. Of course, I was interested before too, but you know, to meet people from Ireland, to get to know, somehow feel what you are now describing.
Yes, you'll have to come to Belfast. Anyone listening to this, to come and visit Belfast. It's a fantastic city. There's so much creativity. And out of the kind of destructive period has grown so much incredible resilience and creativity, and it's over the walls and everything. You know, there's murals, a lot of really interesting murals to see, and it's very heartening in world terms, even though our peace process has also, I think, got stalled a little bit. You know, we need to live the Good Friday Agreement, you know, the spirit of that, to live it, to forgive each other, and to kind of find ways, not in a religious sense, but something about finding deep, I think it's that self-compassion and then compassion for the other, so that we can kind of move forward, not get stuck on old sores and splits. And in a way, the COVID-19 has, I think, throughout the world, presented some opportunities that, as well as a lot of suffering, but there's a kind of, as if there's a gap that can open, that we can have a voice in. And I think we need to have a voice in as Gestalt practitioners around what the future looks like. What kind of future do we want?
Can you elaborate that, say more? Because this is like the question I wanted to ask you, and you found on your own.
I really have an excitement about the work that we can do with children and young people to get them to articulate the kind of world that they most want, and also everyone involved, all ages, you know, throughout the world. I think we all need to grasp this kind of opportunity. So I am involved with a regeneration and well-being group, and we're organising around these themes, as well as Active Hope, which is, I think, very relevant to Gestalt. It's not Gestalt, it's a book that I recommend to all of us, written by Joanna Macy, and it's a process of understanding the industrial civilization that we lived in, but the destruction of that, and that there's a great, she calls it the great unraveling, is going on. So the system is kind of falling apart in various ways and having damage to different, especially some people. and some parts of the earth, but that's increasing and escalating. And then she calls the great turning, that we're in the opportunity for a great turning, and that we need to work, obviously, with people who are getting injured by the current system, and also be part of the changes and live out kind of innovative solutions in the economy, like Kate Raworth, Donut Economics, which is very relevant to Gestalt because it's all about boundaries and respecting the boundaries for people and for planet that will make us sustainable and somewhere safe and hopeful and creative to be, rather than something that young people are frightened about their own future. So yeah, I'm very involved in that and weaving that into my own integration of Gestalt and what I offer around collective trauma. Yeah, so that gives me hope. And we need to stay connected in that and not to feel alone.
Yeah, this is how I understand you. Okay, so I guess that will be the end, and at least for me, the continuation, perhaps the workshop, if you agree to, to advertise it and say exactly the dates and so on.
Yes, it's very soon. It's Saturday week, but I will do that.
Yeah,
and it'll all be very, very welcome, and there'll be other opportunities. Yeah.
Okay, so I will stop now. Okay.